Water is perhaps the second most necessary thing for humans and life in general, but most life does not have the means to solve the problems that will be addressed and, subsequently, most species are at the mercy of nature while humans can leave their natural habitats and temporarily mitigate danger or delay consequences that would kill most life. In the immediate needs of humans, water is preceded by oxygen and followed by food, if we judge by how long one can stay alive without them, even though all are required. Let's compare culture to a river of water. The river is a product of nature just like culture is a product of human nature. Rivers will exist as long as there is water that cannot be contained, and culture will exist as long as there are enough humans to create it. Cultures and rivers are not inherently bad. On the contrary, they sustain life and the stability for ways of life. Yet, both can become deadly if polluted or poisoned, which I would argue both have happened. Culture was poisoned through the normalization of degenerate behavior and immorality, or amorality, through the media, but then we polluted it by engaging in degenerate behavior that we were programmed to think is normal. We were sold a bill of goods and, ultimately, we have to take responsibility for it if we're going to change the situation. We can't concern ourselves with blaming anyone for our naivete. That doesn't mean we shouldn't punish people who sold and continue to sell the bill of goods, we should. They should be publicly punished so our culture develops a mindset that won't tolerate deceptive predators to run amok and receive the benefits of living in our society. But we cannot change our situation unless we accept full responsibility for our contributions to polluting our culture and waterways. If a community lived near a river that was toxic and needed to find a solution, but didn't know the cause, they'd have a few options. The first would be to see if something in proximity was causing the toxicity, perhaps a rotting carcass underneath the surface, or maybe the behavior of those nearby was polluting the river via some form of waste. Most people will spend their energy focusing on the portion of the river that they have immediate access to with the intention that, if they can change the immediate conditions, it would solve the problem. This is akin to focusing on the system of government and thinking that, by changing the representatives and political structure, it will fix the issues. Yet this is not the case, because every viable candidate is a product of the toxic and polluted culture. Making behavior or goods illegal does not prevent anything. A lack of demand is what ultimately decides whether products are discontinued or not. Demand will always determine if creating the supply is worth the risk. But what if, after examining and changing every possible behavior, the river or culture was still toxic? It'd follow logically that the source of the river's toxicity, or the source of the culture's toxicity, is located somewhere beyond where most people are willing to search. This is likely due to inaccessibility, which, if you look at most rivers, their sources are either massive lakes or runoff from mountains, which means one has to have the resources to get deep underwater or to unnavigable locations high in elevation. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means few have the ability to do it. But the point is this: in order to stop the pollution and toxicity of a river, or culture, one must go to its source and discover the cause. Now that this imagery has your attention, I needn't talk about a hypothetical river. I can just say what pollutes most cultures in general, but specifically Western culture, because that's what I experience. For the majority of my life, I lived in the location where most of Western culture is produced and where the trends are set, which is Los Angeles, California, home to Hollywood, which includes the motion picture industry, the music industry, the Western media, and all things entertainment such as the video game industry and other derivatives. Long ago, it was the customs of tribes, villages, communities, or city-states that produced culture. But much of those customs were decided upon by elders, priests, or the nobility. During our era, culture becomes whatever those who control the media decide. They program what's popular and what's inspirational. They are the new priesthood and nobility. But both have something in common. At the foundation of their programs, the source of the culture, there are lies being taught as truth. This creates a wilderness of mirrors, where no one really knows the truth, outside of the default settings of nature that we're increasingly being separated from. It is not the media or systems' fault. It is who controls them and what they use the systems for. It doesn't matter how good a system is if the people who use it are corrupt and despotic. Many think they know the truth, myself included, only to find that, when we investigate further, there are more lies to be uncovered. It's like peeling away layers of a rotten onion, but eventually we will figure out if the entire onion is rotten or if it's just certain layers of it. Some are content to never examine claims that are presented as facts, or when they do, they appeal to perceived authority but never discover the truth for themselves through doing the required work. This leads to untold amounts of cognitive dissonance, discord, and chaos amongst society because there is only one truth, yet everyone thinks they possess it while everyone else has it wrong. But, upon deeper inspection, the truth only exists in facts. Therefore, if you only had one word to define truth, it'd be facts. Oftentimes, there are facts at the core of what people believe is truth, but the facts have been dressed up in so many lies that they are negated. It may be true that lemons are healthy. But when ground up with sugar, gluten, dairy, etc., and converted into a lemon custard pie, it loses its nutritional value. Yes, the custard pie has lemon. No, you cannot eat the custard pie and still get the nutritional value of the lemon without also getting the effects of the unhealthy ingredients. Nowhere is this more apparent than in religion. All culture is based on religion, but the religions are so ensconced in lies that they no longer have any relationship with facts, which begets the condition of our culture. The majority of people are not inherently wicked. And so as a culture becomes more based in lies, even the people within it will no longer support it, and it will degrade until collapse. The root of all problems with our culture was, and is, lies. To the wicked, everything serves as pretext, Voltaire. If we seek to stop the toxicity and pollution of our culture, the only solution is to concede to facts. The main obstacles for getting people to concede to facts are egos, greed, and self-preservation. A new education system needs to be implemented, one that makes people more well-rounded and smarter so that when people say nonsense like, trust the science, yet can't even describe the steps of the scientific method, then the majority of people will recognize this and be able to ostracize and punish those deceivers, removing them from positions of perceived authority. We are a social species. We care more about how we are perceived by others rather than truth, because speaking the truth can get your community upset, which could then lead to your exile. It's a survival trait that we must negotiate with. The only way it gets mitigated is by correcting what communities observe as facts, so that when people speak about those facts, they don't get ostracized. The truth should not be controversial. It should be common sense. But right now, we are a culture that is so enthralled by lies that speaking the truth causes outrage. Right now, we, as a culture, are not educated enough to recognize when we are being lied to, and so we must waste precious time having to correct these flaws that would better be spent in entrepreneurial endeavors. Yet, if we had a proper education system, we wouldn't have to do this. Unfortunately, much of our education is started early in the religious institutions, their lies being no different than the ones you tell to your children about Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny. It's all different shades of the same fraud, however harmless it may initially seem. It's important for those who read my work to recognize that when I write or speak about religion, it isn't personal. I don't think of individuals when I write. I think about the subjects at hand on a macro scale. The personalities don't matter to me. They'll all be replaced. Only the facts matter. I don't know most of you. We will likely never meet. It doesn't matter to me what religion you practice or what you believe about the nature of Earth, the same way that it doesn't matter to me what political ideology you embrace, the health practices and diets you pursue, or the sexuality you practice, unless you bring it to the public and attempt to influence others at an institutional level and normalize your perversions or erroneous beliefs. Many people don't want to hear you talk about your religious or political ideology, the same way you don't want to hear about their sexual preferences or lifestyles. To be frank, I'm not interested in any of it, but an obstacle I've faced is that I live in a culture that is based on lies which people are all too eager to repeat, whether it's in academia, science, entertainment, etc., and it has caused me serious financial damages and setbacks. Ultimately, I have to look for ways to take responsibility for it, at least for being in situations where the decisions made by a society on a macro scale can impact me, but it doesn't change the fact that I built things only to have others knock it down, and I have a finite amount of time where I can rebuild because the clock is winding down. That's life. You've got to make moves and go after things while you can because time is not on your side, even if you're reading this in your teens or 20s. Trust me, the decades go by fast once you get out of school, because time flies when you're having fun. It's a good thing. Life's awesome. It's a wonderful gift and experience, even with the hardships. But it's also something to be aware of so it doesn't take you by surprise. Many successful people lament about how they didn't stop and smell the roses. But they wouldn't have been as successful if they had. There are going to be trade-offs and consequences for every decision, so the more you know before making each decision, the more confident you'll be in your choices, and the less regret you'll have in how your life plays out. As a show of good faith, I will provide some examples in the Spirit World series that demonstrate the lies flowing from religion to culture, and why all things that aren't truth, or in other words, all things that aren't facts, must be abolished from public life. I will do this in a way that proves I am not choosing sides or picking on any one religion more than others. I tend to focus on Christianity and Judaism because I am a product of Judeo-Christian culture, so when I expose the lies in this system, no one can say it's due to hatred or anything like that because most of the people I love and care about are also from this culture, save for the friends I've made that came to America from other cultures. Those who present the greatest threat to all cultures are the people who become zealots. And the only way to get back to a better system of civilization is to expose the lies on a macro scale so that people in positions of perceived authority can't rely on them to continue their agenda. I can't think of a better way than media, and the only media that works for me right now is writing books, because they can be printed to exist in physical form. That's where it's at. That's how ideas spread long before pictures, motion pictures, and the ability to broadcast. A well-preserved book will last much longer than anything in the digital age, and it does not require technology to access it. Islam. What was Muhammad called in the 18th century? Baphomet. In Provençal, Bafa is a lie. Where else have we seen Baphomet used? Freemasonry, the Church of Satan, and their derivatives, which are among the varieties infesting the governments. The Quran, as it is admitted, was made up after his, Muhammad's, death, in a moment of confusion and civil strife, partly from papers in a state of rottenness, and partly from the memories of his followers, and that, 22 years afterwards, it was again made up or redacted by Othman. Thus it can be called no better than a forgery. Godfrey Higgins. One needn't acknowledge or concern himself with the feast of nonsense relating to the cults infesting the governments and poisoning our culture. The abject facts are that Muhammad was called Baphomet in the 18th century. Baphomet is used by cults that are responsible for programming extreme service to self, and the Quran is a forgery. You're entitled to your opinion about these, but the circumstances cannot be changed. Does it invalidate the good things in those texts or in that religion? Of course not. Does it invalidate the authenticity of those scriptures and their perceived authority? Absolutely. Judaism. I wrote in A God's Acre for Winds of the Soul, Herodotus, the so-called father of history, never mentioned Solomon's temple at Jerusalem. Neither Herodotus nor Plato mentioned Solomon's existence. Nor does Herodotus mention Israelites at all. This is an indicator that it's all allegory. How could Herodotus travel by Jerusalem on his way to Babylon and Egypt, write about them, and not mention Solomon and the wonder of his temple's architecture that allegedly cost nearly 8 billion in gold? Herodotus was born in 484 BC, allegedly, when the history in the Old Testament was playing out, yet he mentions none of this. Why? It's because the whole Jewish history is an allegory, something that is not unique to Judaism, but rather a technique of priestcraft. Herodotus, Plato, and Diodorus Siculus didn't notice Solomon's empire because it never existed. Moses and Homer never mentioned the pyramids because they never existed as historical people. Berosus, Strabo, Diodorus, and Herodotus made no mention of Israelites crossing the parted waters of the Red Sea, nor did they hear accounts of it by Egyptians, Jews, Arabs, or Syrians, because none of it's real. Israel was a Phoenician name for Kronos, Saturn, when it was a name for the sun. This was conceded by Eusebius, who cited Porphyry, whose works were committed to the flame for exposing religion. For those who can't read Greek but want to identify the key words in the following image, Kronos looks like Kappa Rho Omicron Nu Omicron, and Israel looks like Iota Sigma Rho Alpha Eta Lambda. The 12 tribes of Kronos, or Israel, the sun which keeps time, are the 12 signs of the zodiac. It's simple and childlike when you understand it, and if you struggle to grasp this, it's because you have been reduced to a childlike state regarding these subjects, due to a culture of lies foisted upon you by the religious institutions and subsequently your own family, friends, and community, who also bought the bill of goods. While it may be difficult to reconcile these things, the path to understanding and freeing yourself from the wilderness of mirrors is laid out in the Spirit World series. No Grecian author cited Moses before Longinus, who lived in the reign of Aurelian. Abbe Bazin. Much of this priestcraft that impacts Abrahamic traditions today was implemented in the 3rd century of the Common Era, circa 270 AD, which leads us to the next Abrahamic tradition. Christianity. The very word Christian, as it is written in Greek, is a Latinized corruption that no Greek would ever write. It is one of many examples that betray it was written in monkish Latin and then translated, in this case transliterated, into perceived older languages to make it appear more ancient. You'll have to go through the Spirit World series for details, where even the works of Justin Martyr are demonstrably corrupted. It is curious too that, although a Greek word and coined in a Greek city, the termination is Latin. Christianos is formed on the model of Romanus, Albanus, Pompeianus, and the like. Archbishop Trench. The New Testament lies to the reader from the title page by claiming the manuscript to be translated from a Greek original. The irony, in my opinion, is, were the Vulgate not a more modern manuscript based on old ones, they could have left it in the original Latin from whence it came, because there are words in the Vulgate that were already archaic and in disuse before the alleged time of Christ, meaning it was based on scripture that predates Christianity, which is corroborated by Eusebius. Those ancient Therapeutae were Christians and their writings are our Gospels and Epistles. Eusebius. It is abject fact that there were no manuscripts, pertaining to the Gospels, in existence prior to the 6th century, which begets the necessity of forgeries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in a cave that manuscripts would never be stored in, completely void of all necessary protocol that prevents paper and ink from rotting and disintegrating. But people buy it because they have no knowledge of the priestly profession. They believe what they want to believe. Besides there being no record of the Gospels prior to the 6th century, some of the names, such as Luke, Mark, etc., are exclusively Latin. They did not exist in Hebrew or Greek. Saint Stephen was the very first martyr of Christianity. The absurdity of the names was exposed long ago. Stephen, a name of the same order as Nicodemus, Philip, Andrew, Alexander, and c. entirely of Grecian origin, ascribed to Jews, who never had such names, nor any like them, Reverend Robert Taylor. Every serious scholar knows about these forgeries, but keeps mum because of the consequences. If one isn't aware, he isn't a serious scholar, yet the majority of academia is unaware. Or, people lie and rewrite things, such as what Bible Hub does. Here we see an example of a mem sophet in the middle of a word that existed in all the Hebrew manuscripts from Isaiah 9, written, Lemerbeh. Go ask anyone who comprehends Hebrew where the letter mem sophet is supposed to be placed in a word. Don't tell them about this. Just corroborate it for yourself, because were this just one typo, the same mistake wouldn't be made by copyists over and over again. It has mystical meaning, just as the names Isaiah and Cyrus have mystical meaning. Bible Hub takes the liberty of correcting this by either adding a space after the mem sophet or changing the mem sophet to a regular mem. They are complicit in covering up the truth. That's how dangerous the digital era is. Every mistake that is discovered will be corrected, and those who discovered or witnessed the forgery will be gaslit and made to appear crazy. The time is nigh, and, even though you don't appreciate the urgency, the Spirit World series has never had a greater necessity to be widespread than in this moment. I sacrificed the most significant years of my life to do this work, to help my countrymen and the world as a whole. People I've learned from paid much worse prices than I have. Don't let it be in vain. Hinduism. It has the same issues and system as the Occident. It is covered extensively in the Spirit World series, but one of the best quotes regarding the religions and history of India is from Higgins. I think sufficient importance is not attached to the fact of the ignorance of the Indians. It is almost beyond credibility. They have nothing pretending to be history, which goes back 200 years before the Christian era. Their Vedas do not pretend to be this kind of work. Their 18 Puranas are 18 cosmogonies, but, by whom or when written, they do not pretend to know. They acknowledge that they do not know what is the meaning of the word Vyasa. Their astronomical tables carry on their face marks of extreme antiquity, but their authors are all unknown. The first historical era is that of Vikramaditya, 56 years BC, preceded by a period of 3,000 years, in which the Hindus pretend to know continuous accounts, either religious, traditional, or historical. This 3,000 years is a chasm which cannot be filled up. This is perfectly true, and I suspect that all their pedigrees in the lines of the sun and the moon, Chandra and Soma, are really sheer nonsense, designed to flatter the petty princes of the present day, and, except for a very few generations back, are not worthy a moment's attention. The whole of their histories of Soma and Chandra are modern inventions. Godfrey Higgins. Buddhism. I've covered the Buddha archetype at length, and its system is similar, but the despotism was historically much worse in Asia under this universal system of priestcraft, and I suspect one of the main reasons for the lack of pushback was the idea of reincarnation. Gutzlaff wrote, "The deadly influence of this atheistical system, combined with the tyranny of the government, completes the mental and spiritual wretchedness of the people. Such is the power of this system that most of the male population at one period or other during life belong to the priesthood." Again, Buddhism is atheism, according to the creed which one of the Siamese high priests gave me. The highest degree of happiness consists in annihilation, the greatest enjoyment is in indolence, and their sole hope is founded upon endless transmigration. We may very easily conclude what an effect these doctrines must have upon the morals of both priests and laymen, especially if we keep in mind that they are duly inculcated, and almost every male in Siam, for a certain time, becomes a priest, in order to study them. From the king to the meanest of his subjects, self-sufficiency is characteristic. The former prides himself on account of having acquired so high a dignity for his virtuous deeds in a former life. The latter is firmly assured that by degrees, in the course of some thousands of years, he will come to the same honor. I regret not to have found one honest man. Many have the reputation of being such, but upon nearer inspection, they are equally void of this standard virtue. Sordid oppression, priestcraft, allied to wretchedness and filth, are everywhere to be met. Notwithstanding, the Siamese are superior in morality to the Malays. They are neither sanguinary nor bigoted, and are not entirely shut against persuasion. The type of deception that priestcraft uses is not exclusive to religions. It is also seen in the histories of nations, because they were also written by the priests. Were the religious scriptures authentic, were the priests not liars and forgers, and were the stories in the scriptures true historical accounts, then I wouldn't include religion in this preface because I have zero aversion to the nature of reality or to facts, meaning, it doesn't matter what they are, my goal would still be to know them and align my decision-making with those facts. I have no problem with how people live their lives in private, so long as they're not hurting others, but when your ideas diverge from facts and you try to influence society by spreading the lies you hold as beliefs, it causes ruin. From there it is a race to the bottom, because behavior that causes ruin was encouraged and normalized. One needn't look any further than the rot and decay of this society. Every kind of perversion has been publicized and normalized over the last century. I could write a different article on this subject, but my opinion is irrelevant. Part of the research in the second portion of this article is from a man who was persecuted at an institutional level for speaking the truth about religion, and the reason I invest my time in uncovering the lies is because everything we know about history is a result of what clergymen have written, and it's only over the last few centuries that people have been able to examine evidence and disagree with the institutions due to freedom of the press. Not a manuscript in existence from the ancient past has avoided passing through the hands of a priest. The window of time regarding the freedom of the press was a small opportunity that is already on its way out because algorithmic censorship and artificial intelligence can rewrite everything inside of the digital media, which is where most information is being corralled into, and the press is now curated by a corporate algorithm, a monstrosity. But ultimately, we've decided to enter into contract with these private platforms for convenience. We don't have to use them. They can do whatever they want because they're technically private. Think about it. No photos left to be found because they're all digital. Artificial intelligence can create any type of photo and make it look realistic, so nothing you see in the digital age can be trusted. No manuscripts left to be found because they only exist in digital documents, which can be forged at will, even through the archived ones that people erroneously believe are safe. Every system known to man is being controlled by individuals associated with the ancient cults that control the institutions we rely on, which set the tone of our culture and decides what we worship and what is trendy. Some of the services they provide are good, while other services require sacrificing the most important qualities we're endowed with, such as privacy and individualism. Most of the problems we face can be solved by confronting the lies, acknowledging them, and then correcting them. A system based in truth will be just like nature, where there is no lie. But until you can get over your emotional attachment to what you believe, rather than what you know, you will be an obstacle for anyone who wants to live in a truth-based system. My goal is to help, whoever is interested, avoid the many pitfalls waiting for us. Some of you are brilliant regarding your own areas of expertise, so there are many ways you can help me and others avoid pitfalls that we don't know about. We can't know what we don't know, which is why it's important to look out for each other's blind spots. Successful people are good at knowing what they don't know and bringing experts in those areas to the team. The more of us who can help others in the subjects we are familiar with, the quicker the lies will be resolved in all areas, whether it's energy, housing, banking, medicine, etc. One of the most useful tools for debunking forgery is the knowledge of philology and priestcraft. Most forgers are not sophisticated enough to account for them, and their success relied on being good enough for the times in which the forgeries were created because only the upper echelon of society was literate. Most of those people were in the service to the religious institutions, even if they weren't religious. Even those in the priesthood were compartmentalized so that only the upper rank knew how to read the Gospels and the secrets encoded. Dive into Spirit World and go through the whole series to bring yourself up to speed. How do you pronounce the word job, as in the book of Job? If you pronounce the J like George or the B like Bob, that is incorrect. Invest in yourself in the members portion of this Substack. What you see for free is only about a third of the content. Become a member to access the rest of this article.